The PolyStat widget allows you to visualize various different groups and then color code them by a different threshold in much the same way that we do with gauges. So, a PolyStat is a really nice way of visualizing lots and lots of different high-level things. When I drag it in here, we can see we automatically populate by subsystem and we group by count. Now, you can see here that some of them are green, yellow, and red. We'll explain that in a moment. But by hovering over each one, we get details of not just the individual value that it represents, in this case 66, but we see the label, see subsystem there. If we scroll in and zoom in, we can see more and more of that detail, and as we zoom out, that detail disappears, meaning that for very busy polystats, you don't get lots and lots of writing, and for smaller polystats with only a few, you'll be able to see much more information, much more closely. So this is a really nice way of actually being able to literally drill down into your information. On the right hand side, we can see some of the typical configurations that we've seen in the other widgets. We can see that the group by is already set here because it's defined in the query. Then we can see the legend. So notice on the right hand side here, we can see the legend is grouped by the individual groupings, for example, the subsystem. If I select threshold, I actually see I can filter by the what is less than 33%, in this case this green, what is 33% 66%, and what is greater than 66%. So you can see here that these threshold legend values are drawn from the actual thresholds that one sets. So this means that you can do things like, for example, show me just the red ones. And this is a really nice thing if you only want to see those that are breaching a given threshold. Very useful when you have huge cardinality and you don't want to visualize everything. In this case, I'll stick to group just because it's more natural for me. Then we can see min, max, units, and decimal. These are common across many of our different widgets. The minimum value here being 0 is relatively expected. The max, though, is set to 100. And some of these values are enormous, 14,000 count, 1,000, 108, and so on. So I can set this to whatever I want, but as I increase it, you'll see that fewer and fewer of them meet the threshold for that 66%. And so as I increase the value and make it bigger and bigger, of course, then everything will go green because it's all less than 33%. So as I change the maximum value, I change the threshold coloring. And that's really important. So you have to pick a sensible maximum value so that when something goes red, it makes sense. You can set the units as well. So for example, I can say milliseconds here. When I hover over it, I don't get a raw number, I actually get a breakdown of what the unit is. So in this case, for example, 1.64 minutes is actually represented in milliseconds in the raw unit value. And the same thing for 14 seconds here and so on. And then down here we have our thresholds. This is all configured the same way as gauges are, but very briefly, one can set relative, which is percentage-based thresholds. One can add new thresholds as well. We can add as many as we like. And we can actually change labels as well. So we can say, for example, here, problem. Okay, it won't appear here, but as we zoom in, we can actually see, and if I actually drag this down a little bit further, you can see it there. So really nice there. When we hover over, there you go. So we can see that it's very customizable. It's also really flexible as well. You know, you can move it around, you can change the height of this thing, and it will automatically snap to mean the sensible zoom, so as much of the polystat is visible. You can also set absolute thresholds as well. So for example, if I know that I have an SLA, it's not really about percentage, it's actually about an SLA. If anything breaches, let's say 50,000, then go red. And that's a problem, because this is a really nice way of also visualizing SLA breaches. This particular thing is a count. So, for example, a massive spike in activity here could indicate that. So, as you can see, it's a relatively straightforward widget to use, but a very powerful widget to visualize. This is really nice for a few different use cases. One is high cardinality views. When you need to visualize the health of lots and lots of different things, this is an extremely information dense way of doing that. And you can add various different high level metrics around these using gauges, and that allows you to create a high level dashboard view and then instantly a view that you can quite literally scroll in on and see more and more details. And of course, you can group by multiple values, you can change the aggregations and so on. This is all wired by the query and by the configuration on the right hand side here. And of course, multi-stat gauges can be triggered by metric spans and data prime queries as well. So you can actually really refine how this information is shown. And that's really important because it means that you can create dashboards that match the business use cases you're trying to meet.